Hello, and welcome to part 2 of 4 in this series on coins and culture in the New Testament. I'm David Winkle, and I am the lecturer for this series. So, in section 1, we discussed how the study of coins is about the interaction of three worlds: the world of the coin, the world behind the coin, and the world in front of the coin. And in this second lecture, we're going to focus on the world in front of the coin, which we defined as those people who used the coinage as a monetary instrument. So in section 1 of this series, we discussed how coins project meaning, how they communicate a world of meaning, and how we want to consider how people in the ancient world received these coins and how they understood them, how they used them, and how they interpreted them. The whole goal here is trying to understand coins within the social dynamics of people. We previously discussed how this is the interaction of sociology and history and theology and biblical studies, and the study of ancient institutions like the temples that would be in ancient cities, celebrating the worship of the pantheon, Greek and Roman gods, as well as the worship of Caesar. Institutions such as families, institutions such as the Roman army, the relationships that people had between master and slave, between poor and rich, between people and and Caesar, their values, their struggles, their beliefs. So we want to try to understand how coins engaged with people. We want to consider the particulars of people, their particular circumstances, their localized contexts, their unique situations. So for example, Roman soldiers may have received coins and then moved as they traveled to different military posts around the Roman Empire. That would be unique to their circumstance as soldiers. People in different cities, depending on what status that city had, may have used different kinds of coinage. So we're interested in how coins may have targeted people in the ancient world with various types of communication and various messages that would have been projected by these coins. So let's consider, for example, the particulars of women, just to give an example. Some coins may have appealed to the changing hairstyles of women. And so we can see that on different coins that different women are shown having different hairstyles. So Livia's hair looks different than Antonia's, and hers is different than Agrippina and senior versus junior. And we can see how this would be different as opposed to the particulars of certain instances of men. We've already discussed the possibility of soldiers and that group of people being one of the major recipients of government payments. So as the mints produced coinage, they would have given those payments to soldiers. So we want to ask the question again, who are the implied readers or recipients of the coins that the producers envisioned? So in other words, who were the authors of the coins trying to reach? That's another way to phrase the question. So the implied readers of coins may have been men who would have understood imperial symbolism, policy, political nuance. They may have been women who were interested in the way that high-ranking, high social status women had their hair. Now, you want to consider the particulars of people and their circumstances, but also the universals. That is, how did coins play a role in death? How did they play a role in taxes? Fear of robbery and war and religion. And some of these universal situations our people are reflected in the fact that many of the ancient coins that we find today are found in hoards. And what I mean by that is they're often found in large quantities, hidden away in pottery or buried in the ground, because people hid their wealth fearing that it would be stolen or found or plundered in the midst of war or robbery or any number of kind of the universals of fear of life and death that all peoples experience over time. And so what I'm trying to get you to see is that when we interpret these coins, we want to keep particulars in mind, but also universal characteristics in mind. Now, another particular characteristic that is particularly important for grammatical historical interpretation of the New Testament is to consider the role of Jews and the Mosaic Law. Now, I want to point out here that the relationship of Jews in the first century toward coins and their images was regulated by the Mosaic Law, but it doesn't end there, and it's not full stop. So what I mean by that is you want to consider the idea that the Mosaic Law was not received directly, but was mediated by scribes and priests and rabbis and the Sanhedrin, which was the kind of the high court in Jerusalem. So whatever the Mosaic Law required of Jews regarding their use of images of people and animals, that was the law of God. However, you want to consider how that law of God was interpreted and mediated by other sources, because it may have meant that there were ways to skirt the Mosaic Law or to interpret it in certain ways so that certain things were allowed, and so you want to consider those factors. Now, when it came to Jews and paying taxes, it's also important to remember that there's not a strict division between between government taxes and religion. So that we're not just talking about a purely financial transaction like we do today in the West. That tithes or alms and almsgiving to the temple for taxes was a cultic act. And what I mean by cultic act is that it was a worshipful act. I mean that it was a act based on their attempt to worship God according to his revelation in the Mosaic Law and in what we would call the Old Testament. So paying taxes, that is the use of coinage, was a communicative act toward God, towards one's religious community, in this case towards the temple, with theological and social implications. And so you want to bring this mindset and awareness of those dynamics into the way that we perceive people receiving coinage and using it in everyday life. Now I want to show you this picture here of what would have been the temple tax, as it's referred to in many texts. So here's a picture of the silver half shekel. Now on the one side is the image of the god Melkart, which would have been an idol. And on the other side, an eagle, an image of an animal. So here, this half tetradrachma, or half shekel, was the medium of payment for the annual temple tax. And it was full of idolatry. So that's an important example to consider. It's a challenge for interpretation, and it shows just how difficult some of the dynamics can be. So once again, I want to refer you to this idea that we want to consider the dynamics of these three worlds and their interactions with each other. We have the world in front of the coin, which is people, which was the people of the first century. We have the world of the coin, which, if we recall, is the world of the communicative power of the fixed text of the coin to project meaning towards those who receive it. And it projects, for example, a world that asks the recipient to live in it or in light of it. So what that means is, if you use a coin with the god Melkart on it, are you acknowledging that Melkart is your god? Are you acknowledging that Melkart is the god of Tyre, the city of Tyre? Are you acknowledging that you worship him in some way if you use it? That is the question, isn't it? Are the users of coins with idolatry on them living in light of it? How are they engaging with that? That's the critical question to ask. Because the people or world behind the coin are the producers who are trying to communicate through it. So the summary here is to grasp that the key point here is that the world in front of the coin consisted of people. We need to be able to know them and understand them as much as possible, even though we are far removed from them.